he is there with people from his family, a whole bunch of people, John Jr., Eric, Tiffany Trump, all sitting in the front row during closing arguments. And of course, everyone's taking note of who is not there. Ivanka and Melania not showing up for a single day of this trial.
Thank you very much. Where's Melania?
Out front now, Stephanie Grisham, former Trump White House press secretary. So, Stephanie, I want to give some context. When that reporter said, "Where's Melania?" Terry, who's sitting here, said that reporter has said that to Trump every single day. So every single day that has been yelled as he's walked in that courtroom. Do you think it bothers him to hear reporters asking, "Where's Melania?" and also at times, "Where's Ivanka?" the two who are noticeably never there?
Oh, absolutely. I know it bothers him. That kind of thing would bother him if Mrs. Trump wasn't at some event and it was really noted. He would definitely bring it up with her. So I'm sure in this context, it's definitely really bothering him.
All right, so there's a source close to the Trump campaign telling CNN that it's possible that Ivanka and Jared could make a joint appearance before the verdict. We're also hearing Ivanka has specific concerns about her kids' awareness of the case because they're older now, and obviously at the heart of it is their grandfather sleeping with a porn star. Do you think Ivanka and her father have actually talked about this in any sort of an honest way, Stephanie?
I imagine there have been conversations, but I don't know about how honest we're going to get. I'm sure she has said, I just want to keep the kids out of this, but more of a not about the porn star angle, but just, I don't want them to realize what's happening to you, Father. I think that would be the way she would say it to him. It doesn't surprise, she would spin it. It doesn't surprise me that she's not there. And as I've talked many, many times, of course, it doesn't surprise me that Melania is not there. This family is really focused on optics. They are always focused on optics. And so I know that today they think they're showing this, the four of them are there and that's good for the optics. And then of course the boys got to go out and shout over each other and talk about how horrible this is. But I think that Melania and Ivanka are both thinking of their own optics and they haven't been here the whole time. And I'm just not sure showing up now would do anything but cause more speculation.
I mean, do you think there's any chance that Melania shows up? I mean, obviously at the heart of this is something I know you've talked extensively about, and she has strong feelings, and it was a humiliating incident, the way the whole thing happened and was covered for her. Nonetheless, her being there certainly does make a huge statement in his favor.
I would be absolutely floored if she showed up. There's just no way. And again, she hasn't shown up this whole time now. And so in her mind, I think she would think that she was caving or even look weak to suddenly show up now. It's hard for me to explain, but that is, I imagine, what her way of thinking would be, because I'm sure the campaign has continued to ask if she would show up. I'm sure he's asked a couple of times for her to show up. I'm sure it's crossed her mind. But at this point, I would absolutely be floored if she showed up.
All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you very much. Always great to see you, and thank you.
Joining us now is Stephanie Winston-Wolkoff, former senior advisor to Melania Trump and author of the book Melania and Me, The Rise and Fall of My Friendship with the First Lady. She's also an ally of the key witness in the prosecution case, Michael Cohen. Stephanie, thanks for joining. So you and Michael Cohen have a lot in common. Two former Trump family insiders who now find yourselves very much on the outside. I know you and Michael Cohen have become good friends. Have you spoken to him since his testimony?
I actually ran into Michael this morning on the street on my way here. He was on his way to getting a cup of coffee with some of his friends. And I think one of the most important things that people need to remember about this case is that Michael Cohen is not on trial. And I'm not here to defend Michael. Michael did what he did, and he's admitted to all of those things. I listen to the news constantly, and to continuously, every time he's introduced, the new favorite, terminology is calling him a gloat, the greatest liar of all time. And I think what's important for people to remember is that the notion that we could sit here and joke about that almost while the, Republican, presidential nominee is someone who committed over 30 false and misleading statements while he was the president of the United States, he doesn't get that type of introduction. So I also think the facts speak for themselves. I really do. I was around during that time with Michael, and that's what made us such, close allies, was we were together he was working for Donald Trump and I was working for Melania Trump. Mm-hmm. And we did have a lot of time together where we both witnessed certain activities and behaviors that only we would know and again, have spoken about.
Yeah, I think you were referring to the Washington Post fact checkers tabulation of 30,000 falsehoods that Donald Trump told as president of the United States, unless I am mistaken. Just to bring.
Oh, there were so many different. I apologize. There were so many different, papers that did. Some were 30, some were 31,000, but around that number,
Yeah.
yes.
So I want to read a portion of Trump attorney Todd Blanche's closing argument. He's the one that referred to Michael Cohen as the greatest liar of all time that you were referring to. And in this part of his closing argument, Todd Blanche, the defense attorney, is talking about the release of the Access Hollywood tape. Quote, "This was an extremely personal event for President Trump. Nobody, and again, I am just going to state the obvious, nobody wants their family to be subjected to that sort of thing. Doesn't matter whether you were running for office. Doesn't matter if you were running The Apprentice. It just doesn't matter if you were just a normal everyday person in the city. Nobody wants their family exposed to that type of story," unquote. In this telling of the Access Hollywood tape story, the release of it, the leak of it to the Washington Post in October 2016, Mr. Blanche is portraying Donald Trump and his family as victims of the Access Hollywood tape release. I was wondering what you make of that argument.
I can't, imagine being, claiming someone is the victim when those are the words that came out of this individual's mouth. And his family really was concerned. I mean, I had lunch with Melania several days after that. She had canceled her Anderson Cooper interview. I wrote about it in the Daily Beast today, where for me it was so shocking to think that Melania was willing to put aside the interview and casually have lunch to discuss, unfortunately, having the word president and the word PUSSY in the same sentence. Now, this was more about, she was nervous. This was the first time that Melania felt that the campaign was in trouble. We knew that Reince Priebus, we knew that everyone around Trump that weren't as close to him as they are now were ready to jump ship. And that was a very big concern to her. The campaign meant everything. And I'll never forget, even when the book Fire and Fury came out, I mean, it was very important for her to let me know that the messaging was that on that night, it was she and Donald who worked so hard together to make sure that he won and was victorious. So I really do know this family, and I really do understand their complicity with one another to make sure that it's win at all costs. I wish I could say otherwise. There's no reason, to claim otherwise if it weren't the case. They've learned how to work as a family to make sure that their perception is constantly on hold.
3 of his adult children have been to court this week. Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Tiffany Trump. Eric and Don Jr. were in fact mentioned by the defense attorneys because they cut different checks to Michael Cohen from their positions at the Trump Organization, and the defense noted if this was a conspiracy, how come neither of these two testified, kind of trying to use the fact that they were there, they're present. The prosecution could have called them, but they didn't, which was interesting. Something else that's interesting I'm wondering about your perspective on is the fact that neither Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, older daughter, nor his wife Melania Trump attended any of the court proceedings. Does that surprise you at all?
If you're all right, I'd love to address first Donald Jr. and Eric.
Sure, of course.
It was during the United States Attorney General District of Columbia's case where I was deposed as well, and as were they. And Don Jr.'s deposition clearly stated that once Donald Trump became president, it was he, Eric, and Alan Weisselberg who were going to be signing off on the checks. And there were a lot of other statements that were given that I think people need to look back at during that time, including the fact that Alan Weisselberg, was involved in the time of the campaign. So was Michael Cohen, and so was I, but unofficially. So I think it's really important that people understand that the people closest to the Trumps are sometimes not made official for certain reasons. There's the capability to do more. As far as, Melania not being in the courtroom, I think that's saving, again, we're back to the art of distraction. If they really, really think that during the verdict, if that's going to really shine this darkness over the verdict and shine light on Melania, to take away from what's going on. I think that is the only possibility of her showing up. Ivanka, she's tried to whitewash her entire involvement in the Trump White House. She's been doing a great job on her Instagram, but having been behind the White House walls and seeing Ivanka and Jared's involvement in everything that has happened up to this date, you can't whitewash that. And so I understand that she has young children and she doesn't want them to hear the disrespectful and disgraceful things that Stormy Daniels had to discuss during this trial, because Trump has still maintained that there was no affair with either she or Karen McDougal. I think otherwise, they're going to keep themselves distance themselves as much as possible.
All right, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.